Alright, let's go. For turn one, most people I see brake a little bit earlier, a little bit too early. They're braking right as the grass ends on the left side. But really, you can keep going quite a bit further and carry quite a bit more speed into the corner. I'm probably going about 10 meters past the grass on the left side. So at around this point is where I'd start getting on the brakes. And there really isn't any solid reference you can use. I simply look at the apex and get a feel for it that way. I'll be braking at around this point, and it's important to keep it right parallel and right by the edge of the track. And then you wanna through this corner in particular, you want to work the brakes quite a bit, otherwise the car tends to understeer a fair bit. So I find that most laps I'll be getting on the brakes initially to slow the car down, and later on in the corner I'll start to use the brakes again. Pretty similar to turn one at Sebring, where the corner is so long that even if the car is turning in nicely and rotating nicely at the beginning, it might go back to understeering later on. So that's when just brushing the brakes a little bit helps quite a lot. I'll be trying to use as much of the apex curb as I can. Not hugely important, but you'll gain a few hundredths. And then on exit, it's important to go as far wide as you can. Not necessarily because you're straightening in the wheel to get the car to go that far wide, but simply you want to carry enough speed that the car naturally wants to run that wide. You want to run it fairly wide as long as you don't touch the curbing, because when you do touch the curbing, if you hit it at the wrong angle, it's very likely that you'll spin. So yeah, be careful with the curbing. Most laps I'll just keep it on the track itself, but use as much of it as I can. And then setting up for turn two, I won't go very far to the right side of the track, so I'll only come back about this far. So I'm pretty much having the left wheels of my car right on the seam that runs down the length of the track. This is about as wide as I'm going. And through here again, because you get two corners, your turn-in points, because they're blind corners and you really don't have any references, your turning points are really based on feel. So through here, I'm generally turning in a little bit earlier than I always expect. I just try to turn in a little bit earlier than I expect, just so that I can get the car right by the right on the outside curb before I actually turn in for turn three. So I want to swing it a little bit wide and then turn it quite a bit, just so that the car's pointed pretty far to the left side before I actually turn in for turn three. So I'll have the car at around this sort of position before I get on the brakes, which is at around this point. So probably about 5-ish, maybe a little bit less, 5-ish meters before the striped white line that runs across the track. And I want to get the whole car, I mean, my left tires, I want to get them as far up on the bit of curbing to the left as I can. And by around this point, it's a little bit hard to gauge when you have to turn in because it's a blind corner. It's by around this point that I'll start to turn in. Through here, you want to cut quite a bit, but not too much. I think the off track on the inside here does a good job at telling you when you've gone too far, because even if you get the off, by the time you get the off track, you also cut the corner enough that you're not gaining any time, you're actually losing some. As close as you can cut it to the off track, that's what you want to be doing generally. And you can carry quite a bit of speed through here. Not worry too much about being early on the throttle out of here. The car can run a little bit wide and pretty close to this inside curbing. And then by this point, it's really important to be patient with the throttle, in that you want to get on the throttle once to send you the whole way around this long sweeping turn 4 and set the car up for turn 5 in time. So you're going to get on the throttle and not get off till you get to that final left-hander at the bottom of the SS. So you'll be full throttle, and through here, it also, a little tip that helps is to get as far up, actually not as far up as possible on the inside curbing, but you want to get about halfway up the curbing, just so that you get a little bit more grip on your outside tires, just because of the way the car is angled, and that there's a bit more weight on the right side of the car, giving the outside tires more grip, and that'll help you keep it a little bit tighter. And the reason you don't want to go a lot further towards the inside than about halfway on the curb is that if you're running 5 SPO or even higher than that, the bottom of the car will start to scrape on the curbing. So about this far. And then coming out of turn 4 and setting up for turn 5, it's not as important as you think to get it all the way back to the left side of the track. Most laps I'll only be able to come back at about this far. And I'm turning in right as the curbing starts on the left side. So there's a bit of white and green curbing on the left side, and that's exactly where I started turning. And actually, if I'm a bit further to the inside, I'll generally turn in a tiny bit earlier than that even. And that'll allow me, turning in at that point will allow you to really get the car over a tiny bit of grass before the actual curbing, and then on top of the actual curbing itself. And you should be able to, again, keep it full throttle the whole way down. Now, setting up for this final turn 6, I think it would be. You wanna, again, pretty similar to turn 2 and blind turn 3. You wanna go a little bit wide on entry, just so that you get the car pointed a little bit further towards the outside of the track. In this case, you want the car a little bit pointed a little bit further to the right of the track. And by around this point, even before you actually get on the curbing, this is where you sort of want to get on the brakes. Again, there's no reference, but through here generally you want to brake probably earlier than you expect, and really focus on carrying the speed through. Not too much on being early on the throttle coming out of here. So I'll be braking in a straight line, aiming to get the whole car on top of the curb before I actually turn in. And by around this point, fairly early, I'll also be turning in. And you want to use the inside curb, but not use too much of it. So I'll only use about half as much. Otherwise, the car ends up bouncing and going a little bit wide. So only use about half of that curb. Then on exit, try to carry enough speed that the car is always right on the edge of touching the gravel on the outside. Yeah, and through that corner in particular, it's very easy to overslow and not carry as much speed as you can through it by focusing too much on trying to be early out of the corner, whereas you'll be a lot better off carrying the speed into it and being late on the throttle instead. All right, so then for turn 7, similar to the last corner, you also want to really carry the speed through here and not worry about being early on the throttle. And in this corner, it makes a little bit more sense, simply because the run between this first right-hander and the next right-hander is so short that it really makes no difference whatsoever to be early or late on the throttle. And then you're way better off just carrying the speed through it and making up the time through the corner, as opposed to on exit. if I get a good run out of the last corner, I'll be able to go up, shift up into 5th gear. And I'll be braking about 4 to 5 meters after the striped white line right in front of me. So I'll go about this far. Before I start to get on the brakes, I'll drop down into 3rd gear, so I'll go down 2 gears. And you wanna, through here, it's pretty easy to gauge if you carried enough speed. Where if you did carry enough speed, the car will only just miss this inside curbing. So you want to pretty much kiss the curb, but you almost only want the sidewall of the tire to actually touch the curb. You only want to kiss it and not use more than that. So really try to carry enough speed that the car doesn't want to go tighter and actually get on the curb. You just want to kiss it. And then on exit, again, because the focus was to carry the speed through the previous corner and not being early on the throttle out of it, you'll likely be very late on the throttle coming out, and you'll actually get on this exit curbing fairly early, which is fine. It would obviously be the slow way if they're a really long straight, but there isn't. There's just another corner, and we actually have to brake for it in a few extra meters. It really doesn't harm you at all. And the braking for turn 8 is a little bit tricky because, again, you can't see the apex at all from this position, and there isn't anything next to you on the side of the track or on the track itself to use as a reference for when to brake. I'll typically just get a feel for it and get a feel for how long I have to drive right on the curbing by the edge of the track before I have to brake. So it's one of those corners that you simply have to drive over and over again until you get a feel for when you have to hit the brakes for the next corner. And through here again, I'll be only dropping down into 2nd gear, come out of the previous corner in 3rd, just drop it down 1 gear into 2nd. Again, I think a lot of people tend to drop it all the way down into 1st, which obviously helps the car turn in a little bit better. But you also tend to slow the car a little bit too much when you stay in the lower gears. And one of the reasons is, naturally when you use a higher gear, you try to carry a little bit more speed as to not bog down the engine. And then on top of that, you have the added effect of getting less engine braking when you're using higher gears, which makes quite a bit of a difference in this car as you approach the corner off the throttle. So keep it in 2nd gear and turn in and brake fairly early through here. And you want to aim to use about half of this curb, not much more than that. Otherwise, you end up bottoming out. And you want to be able to get on the throttle right at the apex of this corner. And again, and at the same time as you start getting on throttle right on the apex, you should also have turned the car enough by this point that you can start straightening the wheel quite a lot to make your acceleration out of the corner as efficient as possible and minimize the scrub created by your front tires. Again, it's a little bit more consistent to only use about half as much of the curbing, because if you don't hit it very straight on, the car tends to bottom out a little bit and you end up losing a little bit of speed if you're on a 5 SPO like me. So most of the time I'll try to only use about half of the curbing and really focus on keeping my wheel as straight as possible coming out. Yeah, okay, so for turn 10A and 10B, which is the chicane, I'm braking just before the shadow past the striped white line that marks the 100 meters. So I'll go past the striped white line, and just before this tree shadow in front of me, I'll get on the brakes, drop down 3 gears from fifth into second. And through here, it sort of is important to brake fairly late, not because you'll gain a whole lot of time under braking, but because it's very important through this corner to really carry the brakes into it and really try to rotate the car very quickly before you get to this first apex of turn 10A. And you almost want to feel like the car is sliding a tiny bit as you're approaching the apex. And through here, it's super, super important to cut as much as you can of the grass on the inside. And you can go pretty far. You can get about half of the car on the grass and not get an off track, and you will gain quite a lot. And really, the idea here is to really brake late and carry the brakes into the corner in a way that allows the car to rotate really quickly, and you almost want to feel like it's snapping and you're sliding into the corner a little bit. And that'll allow you to get the car really straight and pretty close to the left side of the track by around this point, which is where you should be able to get back completely on the throttle and not have to lift off from here till turn 1 of the next lap. And again, that's a really important part of this section, is that you only want to get on the throttle once right here and not have to get off later. Should be getting on the throttle, not having to lift for 10B. And you're going to cut it close at 10B, but if you start using the grass, you'll again find that the car tends to bottom out a little bit, and you lose a lot of speed. And then on exit, even if you feel you don't need to use all of the space available to you, try to straighten your wheel as much as you can, just to make your acceleration as efficient as possible, just to make sure that you're not fighting all that scrub created by your front tires as you're accelerating. So even if you feel you don't need it, try to straighten the wheel to really use all of the space and get the car completely on this bit of curbing on the outside. And then for the final corner, coming out of 10B, you want to point the car at around this angle, so pretty far towards the inside as you go under the bridge. And that will make it so that you only just miss the grass on the inside. And then afterwards, you don't want to go as wide as you can. I'll usually go about this wide. The reference I use is the seam on the left side of the track, and I typically won't go any wider than that. And I'll turn again fairly early. Try to only kiss the curbing on the inside here, just so that the car doesn't bounce around and you lose speed. And then on the exit curve, you can use as much as you please, and that would be the lap.
I'd just like to say thank you again to Johnny for taking the time to give us a walkthrough. If you would like more help from Johnny, he also does private coaching sessions. You can find his contact information down below in the description if you're interested. Johnny was kind enough to share his replay of his time trials with us again this week, so we're going to go to that. Enjoy.